Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic, let's do it. What's a true crime case you would want solved in your lifetime? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Two famous ones would be the Zodiac and JonBenet Ramsey. I have a personal one, though. I used to babysit a little girl named Rosie Gordon in Burke, Virginia. She was abducted riding her bike on Lake Braddock Road, and her body was found 3 days later in '89. Never solved. I'd just been with her 10 days before. Broke my heart. As a Frenchman, I'd really like to know where Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès is. It's a big case in France of a man who killed his whole family, buried them under the terrace of the house, and then disappeared. I'm happy that my usual answer to this question has recently been solved. The boy in the box finally has his name and identity back. Joseph Augustus Zarelli. I would really love to know who the Axeman of New Orleans was. Also, who was responsible for the Villisca axe murders. Maybe I just have a thing for axes. I never heard of this case before, so thank you for bringing it up. I hope it has a somewhat okay ending for at least the family to get some closure. In Denmark in 2016, a 17-year-old girl called Emily Mang went missing. After a night out with friends, last seen close to her home by different witnesses and video surveillance from a train station. Initially, police expected she had just run away from home and did not take it seriously. By the time they did take it seriously, a lot of possible video surveillance that could have helped find her had been deleted. Her body was found several months later dumped in a lake, but the killer was not found, and the case was cold for about 7 years. This year, just 2 months ago, a 13-year-old girl went missing in broad daylight, close to the same area. This time, the police reacted quickly, and the entire country ground to a halt trying to locate her. Within 24 hours, she had been located alive in a nearby property. A 32-year-old man was arrested and charged with kidnapping her, etc. What's more is, he was also charged with a third kidnapping attempt of another young girl. Immediately, the connection to Emily Mang was made, and several things indicate he is likely the killer of Emily Mang, but he has not been convicted of it yet. I really hope this case is no longer unsolved, and it really is him that did it, so we don't have Emily's killer still walking around free amongst us. He, at the time of the murder, owned a specific type of car the police had publicly announced they were searching for. It had been seen in the train station surveillance footage, leaving just as she left. He would have been only 25 at the time. He sold that car shortly after, but it was located in Poland, and they have been examining it for DNA evidence. The Susie Lamplugh case. If you read into it, there's a chance that, through her life, she interacted with up to 3 men who were later convicted of murder. The Met Police think they know who did it, and they think the dude is in jail, but her body was never found. No one has ever actually been convicted of her disappearance or death, and it's one of those cases that actually changed a lot of laws in terms of stalking offenses, and also labor laws in the UK regarding lone working. Emanuela Orlandi. Basically, this 15-year-old girl was supposedly kidnapped and killed back in the 80s in the center of Rome, and many believe that the Vatican and Banda della Magliana, the most relevant criminal group in Rome at that time, were involved. It's a very famous case that never got to be solved, although the authorities reopen it on a yearly basis. There's a documentary about this on Netflix, but I can't tell whether it's only available in Italian. Alonzo Brooks. He was a black kid that went to a party in Lecane, Kansas, and never came home. The local cops couldn't find him, but a group of his family and friends found his body a month later, 100 feet from the house where he was last seen. Brandon Swanson. He was driving home one night in 2008 and drove into a ditch. He called his parents for help, and when they got to where he said he was, they couldn't find him or his truck. He was on the phone with his dad for almost an hour, and he suddenly says, "Oh shit," and then that's it. They found his truck 25 miles away from where he thought he was. It's assumed he got turned around while driving, and after searching the area, they never found him. He's still missing. The most liable explanation is that he fell into a nearby river and drowned, but his body has never been recovered. Jennifer Odom. She was kidnapped on the walk home from her school bus stop in rural Florida in '93. Her body was found about a week later in the next county over. She had been ardent murdered. I didn't know her, but she went to my middle school just after I moved to high school. We had mutual friends. It's been 30 years now. Bung Siraboon, a 13-year-old girl from Melbourne, Australia, who disappeared on her way to school on June 2, 2011. No one ever saw her again. No one knows what happened to her. She disappeared into thin air. I think about Bung a lot. There was one from Texas where a woman went to a church early in the morning for a yoga class and someone came in and killed her. The church had cameras, but the person was wearing like military-type uniform and helmet, so you couldn't see the killer's face. Jody Hoisentrut, North Iowa news reporter who suddenly vanished from her apartment in the early 90s. There's speculation that she went missing due to her uncovering a big underground methamphetamine bus tied to the local Mason City Police Department. Rumor has it, she's buried under the concrete slab on ex-Chief of Police Frank Stern's shop that was built a few weeks after her disappearance. There was a kidnapping that happened near where I lived when I was a teen. The girl's name is Morgan Nick. Back then, it was just something that was big news at the time, but it started to become surreal when I grew older, realizing where she was taken and where I spent a chunk of my childhood. What happened to all the video footage and photographs they confiscated from Jeffrey Epstein's mansion? Well, you know, his suicide was one thing, but someone somehow got a hold of all that collateral he had on his friends and got rid of it. I mean, what do you think happened to them? It's probably in the same drawer that the evidence of any wrongdoing or scandal for the JFK assassination is, or certain former senators' emails, or other presidents' dirty work. Johnny Ghosh. I have my theory, but I want this officially solved for his mom. I believe her, and it's awful how she was treated after her son disappeared. Arushi Talver's case. Really sad what the family had to endure, and despite all these years, they continue to seek justice. Cold War female spy, found dead in a Scandinavian country. It's vague, I put it on since I forgot the exact details. A couple of missing teens from my area, JonBenet Ramsey, off topic a bit, but one I thought would never be solved, haunted so many children I grew up with. Jacob Wetterling. Leah Hickman. Sounds like the cops may have a good idea of who did it, but they have no proof or not enough proof. Very sad case that started off with the police not finding her body, even though a thorough search would have discovered her immediately. Lost time. The 50-year-old mystery of who kidnapped and murdered Bonnie Neighbors, a beautiful young mother, 11 days before Christmas in 1972. It remains North Carolina's most intriguing unsolved murder mystery, due in large part to a combination of incompetence, lack of concern, and malfeasance of local authorities. The story is told in a recently published book, A Wrong Turn Ends in Murder and Becomes a 50-Year Mystery, available on Amazon. For me personally, Adam Richard Johnson from Minneapolis. He was murdered in 2021. His dismembered body parts were found scattered in multiple public places over the course of a couple of weeks. Perv was carved onto his forehead, but the reasoning is unclear. He was an addict who suffered from mental health issues, but he was also a father of two. Somehow the police don't seem terribly concerned that someone in their city is capable of butchering a human being and putting their corpse on display for random citizens to find. Blows my mind. The last update was in October of 21, stating the FBI was involved with the investigation, but it's been silent since then. I can't remember the name, but a 19-year-old guy went hiking and disappeared. A while later, a construction crew went to tear down a cabin in the woods and found the guy stuck in the middle of the chimney in the fetal position, naked, and inside his clothes were perfectly folded on the coffee table. There's a lot of questions that haven't been remotely answered. Maura Murray. She was a UMass student whose car was found on the side of the road in a remote area of New Hampshire about 130 miles from UMass on a weeknight in February. So many aspects of this situation are just strange. The death of Frauke Liebs. During the 2006 FIFA World Cup in Germany, a 21-year-old woman vanished on the way home from a pub. Went on to call her family daily, claiming she'd be home soon but evading detailed questions. Her body was later found in the woods, but no clues whatsoever. To this day, her family remains heartbroken, but hopes of getting closure are fading. We all know Joran van der Sloot killed Natalie Holloway, and he extorted $15,000 of her parents. I just want him to tell him where he left the body, and what his reason was for murdering her and leaving her family to suffer, not knowing what went on in her final hours. No matter how hard the truth is, they deserve to know before someone succeeds in ending his life. In 4th grade, my lunchbox was stolen, and I swear it was that shitbag Dave Cody. Because at lunch, when I didn't have food, he offered me half of his sandwich, which was tuna, made by Mom's special way. She mixed shredded carrots in. My teacher did nothing. I know the statute of limitations has expired, but I'd love to run into him at a restaurant someday and swipe his dinner. Do it. The Bende van Nijvel gangster terrorist killing 28 people in a period between 82 and 85 in Belgium, while mainly robbing supermarkets. The whole investigation is and was such a mess that nobody was ever convicted and most likely never will. The Colonial Parkway murders. In what looks to be undeniably the work of a serial killer, the Colonial Parkway murders remains unsolved nearly 30 years later. Between the years of 1986 and 1989, at least 8 people disappeared along the stretch of highway connecting Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. The victims included 3 couples whose bodies were all found in the surrounding area, and another couple who remains missing. While no one has ever been convicted of the crimes, investigators continue to search for clues and answers. The closest they've come is the arrest of Frank Atwell, a former Gloucester deputy sheriff who had ties to the case, but nothing conclusive ever came from the arrest. No more murders have occurred matching the killer's profile, but a case like this leaves you wondering if he's still out there, waiting. Daniel Morgan, an investigative journalist who was killed in a pub car park, and nobody has ever been brought to justice. It's a case linked to decades of corruption in the Metropolitan Police Force here in London. Either the police killed him, or the police know who killed him and are protecting them or covered it up, or his next story was going to be so explosive that he made enemies that even the police were afraid of. Alexandra Wierchuk, young nurse in Saskatoon, SK, Canada, went for a walk to mail some letters in the summer of 1962 and never came home. Found buried in a shallow grave near the river just blocks from home. They have exhumed her remains and found foreign DNA, but to this day the police are still looking for eyewitnesses, not doing a genealogical DNA search. In 1961, she was in a beauty queen contest where she won. The winner was to be serenaded by none other than Johnny Cash. He sang "The Girl in Saskatoon," you can find it on YouTube, a song he recently co-wrote while on a road trip. Later, when he heard she'd been murdered, he shelved the song, swearing to never record it again. I find it interesting because of all the rumored suspects and the fact that her next-door neighbor across the back alley was Sanford Clark. That's a whole other rabbit hole which his biographers slickly gloss over, if not totally ignore. Thomas Ince, the father of Western movie producer who died shortly after his 42nd birthday, which he spent on William Randolph Hearst's yacht of acute indigestion. To put it in context, Hearst was today's version of Trump. Many believe W.R. Hearst had something to do with it, but no one ever said for sure. And apparently, all accounts of that weekend are spotty. Did not help that he owned the largest newspaper empire at the time. Oh, and one of the guests? Luella Parsons. She got a lifetime contract for her gossip with Hearst Publications after that trip. Orson Welles was brave in making Citizen Kane. The three men who escaped from Alcatraz. I know the official line is that they drowned, but I remember reading somewhere that two of them were seen in Brazil, and there was photographic evidence of them. Natalee Holloway. Her disappearance dominated the news in the mid-2000s, and unlike other high-profile cases of MWWS, she was never found. She was only 18. I want them to find her body, if anything is left of it by now, and close the book on this case. Joran van der Sloot has stopped short of outright confessing to her murder, but he's been all wink wink nudge nudge I did it with authorities for years now. He's currently serving time in a Peruvian prison for an unrelated murder. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann is a true crime case that I once solved in my lifetime. It's a heart-wrenching case that has been going on for over a decade, and I believe that the truth needs to be uncovered. The possibility of human trafficking and the involvement of foreign governments only makes it all the more mysterious and intriguing. Justice needs to be served for Madeleine and her family. JoanBenet Patricia Ramsey. ID did a show on this and all but solved it. However, officially it remains unsolved. ID had a pedophile go on witness and claimed he watched her murder via DSLM 96. He said the camera was very grainy, but that someone out there has an actual tape of her death. He said he just watched the show but didn't expect to see her death. It's been a long time since I touched on the JoanBenet case. Wasn't it like her brother and the family covered it up or something like that? It had to be someone from in the family based on the state of the house, right? The only thing that intrigues and equally scares me is Skid Row, and it's not for the reasons you may think. Skid Row is literally a hellhole on earth, worst slum in the USA. Now, it's important to understand that not everyone in Skid Row is a drug addict or homeless, but a ton of people in there are lost to drug addiction and stricken by financial poverty. Obviously, this is a natural habitat for serial killers, drug runners, and much more. What I want to know is how human traffickers are running the operation in Skid Row. The heart of Skid Row holds the answers, but LAPD is 1, scared to go in there, 2, no one actually cares, yet this is a profitable ongoing business. Not the best idea to even enter the outskirts of Skid Row. If you don't know what you're doing, street rules in there are completely unorthodox. So how does one make it to the heart? Keep in mind, the folks in there have no physical address. It's an unorganized, heavily populated ghost town. That's something worth solving in my lifetime. Diana Bronckert. She was a senior in high school in my hometown and was last seen walking to her car after work in 1987 and was never seen again. Very small town in Missouri. My dad was in her class at school and her parents are both dead now. Not a shred of evidence has ever been found. Also, Amanda Jones from the same town. She was pregnant and went to meet the father for lunch and was never seen again. Multiple massive searches of local properties have found no evidence, and the guy she met has changed his story multiple times. There's hardly ever serious crimes in the area, but we've had 2 women disappear with no evidence. Crazy stuff.